The sun was sinking behind the jagged ridges of Frontier Ridge, throwing long shadows across the dusty streets as the evening wind carried the scent of horses, sweat, and old timber through the town. Inside the creaking saloon, the clatter of poker chips, drunken laughter, and off-key piano notes filled the smoky air, until the door slammed open with a violence that silenced the room. Every head turned. A ragged old man stumbled inside, gripping the arm of a young woman who looked too fragile, too gentle for a place carved out of dust and sin. Her hair was tied back loosely, her clothes worn but clean, and her eyes, her terrified, pleading eyes, told a story far darker than the bruises half hidden beneath her sleeves. The man dragging her forward was her father, though tonight he looked nothing like a protector. His beard was unwashed, his breath foul with whiskey fumes, and desperation twisted his face into something rotten as he slammed her down at the bar. "One bottle," he barked at the bartender, slapping his trembling hand on the counter. "Strongest you got." The bartender squinted. "With what money, Earl?" "You're already in debt." Earl's lips curled into a sick smile as he grabbed his daughter by the shoulder and shoved her forward like a sack of grain. "Her," he said. "She'll pay my tab." A collective gasp rippled across the saloon. The girl flinched, her voice shaking as she whispered, "Pa, please, don't." But Earl didn't look at her. Didn't even blink. To him, she had stopped being his daughter long ago. Panic flickered through the room. This wasn't the first time a man had tried to barter something other than coin, but selling your own blood, your own child, was a sin that even hardened outlaws found hard to swallow. Still, no one moved. No one interfered. Until the heavy, calm footsteps of a man in a long brown duster coat echoed from the back corner of the room. He had been standing alone, leaning against a wooden pillar as he watched the scene unfold, his face half-shadowed beneath the wide brim of his hat. His jaw was strong, his eyes cold and unreadable, eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty to be easily shaken. A leather holster clung to his hip, and in his hand were a few gold coins that glimmered under the lamplight. He stepped forward slowly, like a man who knew exactly what he was doing and feared nothing that breathed. The entire room watched him approach. Earl froze when he saw him. "You stay out of this, cowboy," he spat. "This here's my business." The cowboy didn't answer at first. He glanced at the girl, her trembling shoulders, her pale face, her silent tears, and something shifted in his expression. A hardness, a decision. He turned his gaze back to Earl and spoke with a voice calm as a still river. "A man who sells his daughter for whiskey," he said, "ain't fit to call anything his business." Earl bristled, but the cowboy didn't give him time to speak. He flipped a gold coin between his fingers, letting it catch the lantern light. "You said you wanted whiskey," the cowboy continued, stepping closer. "How about this instead?" He held out the coin, then dropped two more into his palm, 3 gleaming pieces of gold. The saloon fell dead silent. Earl's eyes widened with greed. Even the bartender blinked. That much gold could buy land. Horses. A new life. "I'll pay double whatever she's worth to you," the cowboy said, his voice dropping lower, colder. "But not to buy her. To save her." Earl swallowed hard. His eyes darted between the whiskey bottle and the gold. "Why?" he croaked. "Why'd you pay for her?" The cowboy leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because someone should." Earl hesitated, just long enough for guilt to flicker across his face, but greed swallowed it whole. He snatched the coins from the cowboy's hand and stumbled back, muttering something about new chances as he reached eagerly for the whiskey bottle. The bartender reluctantly slid toward him. The girl stared at the cowboy, stunned. Why would you do that?" she whispered. He didn't touch her. Didn't crowd her. He simply tipped his hat. "Because no one deserves to be sold," he said. "Not here. Not anywhere." But the room wasn't finished with them yet. A group of rough-looking men at a poker table stood, exchanging looks. "She's free now, huh?" one of them drawled. "Meaning fair game." Another smirked. "Cowboy, you should have minded your own business." The cowboy turned toward them slowly, too slowly. The kind of slow that meant danger. "If any of you take one step toward her," he said quietly, "you won't take another." A tense silence stretched, then the first man moved. His hand reached for his gun, but the cowboy was faster. Much faster. In a blur of motion, the cowboy's revolver was drawn, cocked, and aimed before anyone could blink. The hammer clicked. The room froze. Even the piano player stopped breathing. "Sit down," the cowboy said. They obeyed. Instantly. The girl stared at him with disbelief, and something softer, something like hope, starting to bloom beneath the fear in her eyes. Her voice trembled. "What happens now?" The cowboy holstered his gun and offered her a steady hand, not forcing, simply offering. "Now," he said, "you come with me. Somewhere safe. Somewhere your father can't sell you again." She hesitated, glancing at the door, where her father had already collapsed in a corner with his bottle, forgetting she even existed. The realization broke something inside her. She looked back at the cowboy. And took his hand. As the saloon doors swung shut behind them, the townsfolk watched, whispering. No one knew who the cowboy truly was. No one knew why he cared. But one thing was certain, the story of the men who bought a girl's freedom, not her body, was just beginning. And the dangers waiting in the shadows outside would make tonight look like mercy. The night air outside the saloon was cold and sharp, the kind that sliced straight through a person's bones, but the girl, Lily, felt strangely lighter as she stepped into the darkness beside the cowboy who had just torn her fate away from the jaws of hopelessness. For a long moment, they both stood silently beneath the flickering lantern hanging above the saloon door, the dusty street stretching empty before them like a path no one had dared to walk in years. The cowboy, who had yet to share his name, finally spoke in a quiet voice, "There's a place outside town. A small cabin I use when I pass through. You'll be safe there for tonight." His tone gave no room for doubt, no crack for fear to slip through. Lily nodded, though her voice trembled as she asked, Do you save strangers often?" The faintest hint of a smile tugged at the cowboy's lips. "Only the ones worth saving." They walked through the moonlit road, the crunch of dirt under their boots the only sound between them, until they reached his horse, a tall, strong creature with a coat black as midnight. He helped her climb into the saddle, then mounted behind her, keeping a respectful distance yet ensuring she was steady and safe. The ride out of town was slow, calm, but Lily kept glancing back toward the orange lights of the town fading into darkness. "He's not going to come after me, is he?" she whispered. "Your father?" the cowboy asked. "No. He made his choice." Lily lowered her head, not knowing whether to cry or let the numbness swallow her. Her father had traded her for a bottle, and never even looked back. The cowboy didn't rush her thoughts. He let the silence comfort her until the cabin came into view, small, rugged, isolated beneath a cluster of towering pines. Smoke from an earlier fire still lingered faintly in the air. He dismounted first and helped her down gently, offering her a blanket from inside and lighting the lantern that cast warm light across the humble room. "You can rest here," he said, nodding toward the cot. "No one will bother you." "I'll stay by the door." "By the door?" she asked. "All night?" He shrugged. "Just in case trouble decides to visit." She sat slowly on the cot, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and watched him settle into a wooden chair near the entrance, hat tipped down, revolver within reach. The sight of his silent vigil stirred something in her chest, something unfamiliar but grounding. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "Colt," he replied without looking up. "Colt Maddox." She whispered his name under her breath as if memorizing it, as if it was the first safe thing she had held onto in years. Hours passed in quiet stillness until she finally drifted into sleep, deep, peaceful, the way a person sleeps only after surviving the worst day of their life. But dawn would bring a new threat. At the first light of morning, Colt noticed hoofprints in the dirt outside. Fresh ones. And not one set, 3. Whoever had visited had not come inside, but they had come close enough to leave a warning. Colt's jaw tightened. "Someone was here," he said when Lily awoke, still bleary-eyed and wrapped in the blanket. Panic flashed across her face. "My father." "No," Colt said calmly. "Someone worse." Back in town, the men he had threatened in the saloon had not forgotten the humiliation. One of them, a man named Briggs, had a reputation for cruelty that made rattlesnakes look gentle. And Briggs had decided that Lily was worth far more than a night's argument. "They followed us," Colt said, checking his saddlebag, his rifle, and the perimeter with sharp, trained eyes. "And they'll be back." Lily's breath rattled. Why? Why can't they leave me alone? Colt turned to her, his expression softer than she had ever seen. Because people like Briggs take what they want and expect no one to stop them. But I'm not no one. She stared at him with wide, fearful eyes. You'll fight them. I'll protect you, he corrected. There's a difference. They spent the morning preparing the cabin, moving barrels in front of the windows, checking ammunition, securing every entrance. Lily tried to help, but her hands trembled too much. Colt noticed and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. You're safe with me, he said. I promise you that. She swallowed hard. No one had ever promised her safety, not even her father. When the sun climbed high, the sound of horses thundered in the distance. 3 riders. Briggs at the front. Colt pushed Lily behind the bed, giving her one last steady look before stepping outside with deadly calm. Briggs grinned a crooked, vicious grin as he stopped his horse a few feet away. Mornin', cowboy, he drawled. We're here for the girl. You can step aside now. Colt didn't move. Didn't blink. You should have stayed in town, he said. Briggs chuckled. Funny. I was about to tell you the same thing. The other men reached for their guns. Colt drew first. A single shot, clean, fast, knocked the weapon from Briggs's hand. Another shot grazed the hat of the second man. The third froze, unsure. Colt spoke again, his voice low and razor-sharp. Next shot won't be a warning. Briggs snarled, eyes burning with hatred. You think she's worth dying for? Colt's jaw tightened. I think she's worth living for. Briggs spat on the ground. This ain't over. But it was, for now. They retreated, cursing under their breath, promising revenge. When Colt stepped back into the cabin, Lily rushed toward him, tears running down her face. You could have been killed, she whispered. He shook his head. Not while you're under my protection. She stared at him, at the men who had given up gold, safety, and sleep just to keep her alive, and something inside her shifted forever. Why are you doing this? She asked again, voice cracking. Colt sat down beside her, removing his hat, letting the morning light soften the harsh lines of his face. Because I've seen too many people thrown away by the ones meant to love them, he said quietly. And because your life shouldn't end in a saloon, or in fear, or in someone else's price tag. Lily looked down at her hands. I don't have anything to give you. Colt shook his head. You don't owe me a thing. She lifted her gaze slowly, tears shining like morning dew. Then, what happens now? Colt stood and offered her his hand, not as a rescuer, not as a stranger, but as a man choosing her future over her past. Now, he said, I take you somewhere they can't follow. Somewhere you can start again. Her breath caught. With you. Colt smiled faintly. If you want. She took his hand, firmly, without fear for the first time. And just like that, Lily stepped out of the cabin not as a girl who had been sold, but as a woman choosing her own fate. Together they mounted his horse, riding into the rising sun, leaving the shadows of Frontier Ridge behind. A new life, a second chance, and a bond forged not by blood, but by courage, awaited them in the wide, wild world ahead. And to all the viewers following this dramatic Wild West tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive.